Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This will bring to close another day of broadcast excellence, a little bit of a light day of broadcast excellence, and I'm not going to subject you to Bible Hub. Well, I am, but secondhand, because I'm going to read a little bit out of my book that you can't see the cover of, Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods, as featured on Coast to Coast AM. There you go. It's a little bit easier to see. Colors don't really work well for television, but at any rate, whenever you can talk about something that's never been talked about before, whenever you can bring something to people that's never been brought before, with all the YouTube videos and everything going on, you can do something original. That's pretty darn good. And this is original. When did I do this on Coast? How long's it been? Let's see. Originally, this is the original copyright 2015, second edition 2017. So 3 years ago, we did this on Coast to Coast AM. And I want to bring to you a revelation that I don't know I've never heard anyone else talk about this. And it blows my mind because it's very clearly in the text. How can you not see it? I mean, I'm not the first guy that ever decided to read from the original Hebrew text, the Old Testament. I'm not the first guy that ever discovered how to use Bible Hub. I don't get it, ladies and gentlemen. It's almost as if there's a conspiracy to keep us from understanding biblical truth. It's almost as if there's a group of people that don't want us to get it. I know that's crazy, but it almost seems that way, ladies and gentlemen. And we're talking about the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. What really happened, and was it the end of human telepathy? Seriously. So I'm going to read to you from the Old Testament through my book, and it says, and I think I'm reading, I don't know if this is a King James or not. I think it is. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stones, tar for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered across the face of the whole earth." And we've always been taught, ladies and gentlemen, that this was the first great rebellion of men against God. And what it really was, ladies and gentlemen, was the last great attempt prior to the establishment of this fear and guilt control matrix of man to throw off the yoke of a false, fallen God. It was the last great act of humanity, the last great collective act of humanity, but there's one coming up, cousin. I believe it. The last great collective act of humanity to rebel against Yahweh and try to go back to those days of Genesis 1:1 splendor. That's what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. It was an attempt to return to the gods by rebelling against the Lord. It was a great concerted effort of humanity to chart a course back to our original exalted state. And I'm going to prove that to you, not by any Bible codes, not by any fancy exegesis, not by channeling or not by automatic writing, but by reading to you what the text actually says. That's really good coffee. So here we go. Now, the whole world had one language and a common speech. What that says literally is the whole world still had spoke with one mouth, speech, or account. All the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. That's how you would literally render that passage from the Hebrew into English. All the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. What this is a picture of still unified humanity. And I can't help but wonder if it was still humanity that was able to communicate telepathically. Now, that's not in the text. That's purely download. That's purely revelation, or some might call it wishful speculation, but it makes sense. When you put it together and add it up, it makes sense. At least to me, it does. That this would be where the telepathic communication, with the ability to communicate telepathically between peoples, was interrupted. And it would make even more sense if this was the last great opportunity, the last great offensive of a unified humanity to come against Yahweh. Because if they almost won, and they almost did, they came close, you got to make sure that it can never happen again. So Yahweh, I mean, if people are speaking one language, you confuse their languages, they can learn the languages. That's not a big deal. It might take a while. How long does it take you to learn a language? People go to these schools and learn it in 6 weeks. But let's say it would have taken them 6 months to learn a language. But if they are communicating telepathically and you disrupt their ability to do so, it's been 6,000 years at least, cousin. And we're just now starting to get back to the very periphery, coffee pot, of being able to even think about telepathic communication. So they spoke with one language, one mouth of the true accounts, and the people moved eastward. Literally rendered, that means that the people pulled up stakes and set out on a journey, moving away from the prior time or situation. Now let me give this to you. I'll combine the verses as we go. All the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. They decided as one to pull up stakes and set out on a journey to move away from their present situation. Humanity had realized what a horrible mistake they'd made. They realized that they had turned their back on the Elohim, and whether the Elohim were good, bad, or indifferent, they weren't Yahweh. Yahweh was probably an Elohim, and Yahweh was oppressing them. Yahweh had them in this pen. Yahweh was working them hard. And they realized that, you know what, we had it much better. We had it much better under the Elohim. And this just dropped in my mind. It's almost a parallel to the Israelites, supposedly, coming out of Egypt and saying, you know what, we liked it better in Egypt. At least we had leeks and garlic. Just a thought. So humanity is like, listen, we screwed up, cousins. And it's time for us to go back to where we began. It's time for us to go back to the Elohim. It's time for us to go back to the place that we were. And you know what? That's not a bad idea. If ever you find yourself lost, if ever you find yourself in a pickle, if ever you find things aren't going right, it's not a bad idea to go back to the place where it was last going right for you. Now, you don't have to do that. You can just go back to the place in here where it was right. But if it's practical, it's not a bad idea to go back to that physical place where the last time you remember being right. Go back there. Change your state. Get yourself back into a place that you know was good for you. Just a thought. That's not in the text. That's free. I know these glasses are annoying, but I can't see this without them. So then it's like oh, this is good. I wrote this and I'm like, whoa, this is good, because I just realized it. It's like when the prodigal son came to himself. Isn't that funny? I just did that yesterday, talked about the prodigal son. When he came to himself and said, what am I doing? I'm here with the pigs. I'm living below my station in life. I'm supposed to be a son of the nobleman. And that's what humanity said. Listen, we were created in the image of the Elohim. And here we are serving this reptilian god with these reptilian guys beating us up and making us work. So it said, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And what that really says in the Hebrew is, let us choose for ourselves to make ourselves pure, thoroughly pure. So let me give it to you again. All the people had one language, spoke with one mouth of the true accounts of the Elohim. They remembered the truth of the Elohim. They decided to pull up stakes and set out on a journey to move away from their present situation. And they said amongst themselves, let us choose to make ourselves pure, even thoroughly pure. Ladies and gentlemen, they knew what was going on. They had just moved into true repentance. And the King James says they use brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. And when I tell you what the Hebrew really says, you're going to get really mad at the chicanery and the deception and the outright falsehood of the King James Version and every other Bible version. Because listen to what that verse really says, ladies and gentlemen. Let purity be our pillow and tie us together as mortar. That's what it really says in the Hebrew. Let purity be our pillow and tie us together as mortar. One language, one account, pull up stakes, set on a journey, move away from our present situation. Let's make ourselves pure, even thoroughly pure. Let purity be our pillow. Let it tie us together like mortar. Come, let us build a city. Let us build an exciting abode of men opposed to what we have had. Let us build an exciting abode opposed to the oppression that we've had. With a high tower and a strong fortress, the head of which is the highest of the heavens. And I'm not even going to comment. Just let me read it to you, what we've discovered to this point. And the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. They decided as one to pull up stakes and set out on a journey, to move away from their present situation. They said among themselves, let us choose to make ourselves pure, even thoroughly pure. They said with one accord, let purity be our pillow. Let it tie us together like mortar. Let us build an exciting abode for us, opposed to the oppression we've had, a high tower and a strong fortress, the head of which is the highest of the heavens. They said, let us create ourselves. Let us unindoctrinate ourselves. Let us be our own guru, guide our own spirits, master our own ascension. That's what they said, ladies and gentlemen. It was a wholesale repentance, a wholesale change. And then King James says that so that we may make a name for ourselves. And in the Hebrew to English, it would literally read, let us accomplish the plans of our gods and make a reputation of lasting holiness for ourselves. For if we do not, we fear that we will be ultimately broken and scattered, and that there will be no hope for man to rise above this clay. I'm going to read the whole thing to you one more time. This is the whole thing from humanity's viewpoint, and then we'll show what Yahweh did. The people still had one language, and this is what the literal language says. I know what you've been told. I know what you've been taught. I know what you've been sold. I know what you've bought. But this is what the language really says, guys, gals, those of you that aren't sure. This is what it says. All the people still had one language and spoke with one mouth of the true accounts. They decided as one to pull up stakes and set out on a journey to move away from their present situation, saying among themselves, let us choose to make ourselves pure, even thoroughly pure. Let purity be our pillow. Let it tie us together like mortar. Let's build an exciting abode, opposed to the impression we've had, a high tower, a strong fortress, the head of which is the highest in the heavens. Let us accomplish the plans of our gods and make a reputation of lasting holiness for ourselves. For if we do not, we fear that we will ultimately be broken and scattered, and there will be no help or hope for man to rise above this clay. Quite a different story than what you've been taught. Quite a different story from what you've been sold. Quite a different story from what you've been told. But that's the truth, cousins. That's what it really says. And let's go through the Lord's response. And I'm going to shortcut it a little bit. I'm not going to read you the King James. I'm just going to read you the literal Hebrew to English. And the Lord saw that the people had repented and decided to dedicate themselves to the high and lofty ones of heaven. In other words, he was panicking. He saw that his gig was up. He saw that men had rededicated themselves to the Elohim. And he said, if by binding together and speaking with one mouth, they're accomplishing this, that's why I think it was telepathy. If by, and I can't even read it without this, isn't that terrible? If by binding together and speaking with one mouth, they're accomplishing this, I think it was telepathy. Nothing can stop them from being reconnected to and fortified by their original plan and doing anything they intend to do. I want you to notice this, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yahweh. This is the God of the Old Testament, the one that's supposed to be high and mighty, and there's none like me, and boom, 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 I'm the greatest. But do you see what he just said about you and about me? He said this about our ancestors. He said this about our forefathers. He said this about us. We are the spiritual progenitor of these people. We are the physical progenitor of these people. And listen again to what Yahweh said about them. If they bind themselves together and speak with one mouth, nothing can stop them from being reconnected to and fortified by their original plan and doing anything they intend to do. If I have any message, if I have any influence on any person ever, let my influence be to let you know and to proclaim to you in no uncertain terms that if we bind ourselves together, if we speak with one mouth, nothing can stop us from being reconnected to and fortified by our original plan, and nothing can stop us from doing anything we intend to do. We're divine, we're sovereign, we're free, and the only thing that's remaining is for us to believe it and act like it. So the Lord said, let us go down and mix up and water down their intention and communication so they cannot combine with their neighbors. See, it was telepathy. Listen to what the Lord said. He didn't say, let's garble their languages. He didn't say, let's make them be K, boss, huh? He didn't say that. He said, let us go down, mix up, water down their intention. They were speaking through intention. It was telepathy, cousins. Let us mix up and water down their intention and communication. They were communicating through intention. That's telepathy, cousins. Let us water down and mix up their communication and intention so they can't combine with their neighbors. That's the only way he beat us. So the Lord broke them in pieces so they could not rise above the clay, and they ceased and left off. The Lord divided them so they could not rise above the clay, and they ceased and left off, trying to get back to their former abode in the station that they had held. Let's put it all together one time. I know some of you get upset with me about repeating things. That's because you don't understand anything about communication and learning. What is the mother of learning? Repetition. I don't know why I even addressed these numbskulls. But once more from the top, through it all. The Lord saw that the people had repented and decided to dedicate themselves to the high and lofty ones of heaven. If we allow them to bind together like this in one voice and mind, nothing can stop them from breaking my bondage and being reconnected to the original plan and doing anything they intend to do. Let us go down and mix up and water down their intention and communication so that they cannot combine with their neighbors. The Lord divided them so they could not rise above the clay, and they ceased and left off trying to get back to their former abode and station they held. That comes out of my book, serpents and doves in the garden of the gods. Who knows how many thousands of years ago that took place, but we know it's been a while. And we know that we were battered, we were bruised, we were beaten, we were defeated, but I feel the spirit of Babylon, the spirit of Babel, the spirit of the tower coming back, ladies and gentlemen. I fear that we again are realizing how bad we have it. I feel again that we're realizing what we left behind. And I feel again that we're ready to throw off the yoke of bondage of Yahweh, Marduk, Jehovah, rat bastard. We're ready to throw off that yoke again. We're ready to combine our intention again. We're ready to take him on. And maybe this time we can do it. I think we should give it a shot. I think that we have learned enough, progressed enough, and increased enough in number. You know, somebody said that 70% of the people on planet Earth are either automatons or don't have souls. That sounds depressing. But I did the numbers a little bit earlier. And if in fact 70% of the people on Earth are empty shells or automatons, that means 30% of the people aren't. That's right, Rooney. 30% of 7.5 billion is a little over 2 billion. 2 billion. Tell you what, give me 2 billion cousins getting busy, and I'll take those odds. Give me 2 billion cousins asking questions and questioning answers. Give me 2 billion cousins unindoctrinating themselves. Give me 2 billion cousins creating themselves and building the life they'll love. Give me 2 billion cousins doing the inside job. Give me 10 billion cousins guiding their own spirit, masking their own ascension, being their own guru. Give me 2 billion cousins that realize we're the last generation of real humans. 2 billion cousins ready to get busy. I will join up with you today. And we'll either win this thing back or we'll go down in a blaze of glory. But we won't go quietly, ladies and gentlemen. I like those odds. I'll take them. Who's with me? I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. This is New Cosmic Knowledge. This concludes another broadcast day. We'll see you again tomorrow with a morning mantra. Moving into the weekend. Don't let this go in one ear and out the other. Let it bounce around in there for a little bit. Let it bounce around in there for a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty. We're the last generation of real humans. Let's get busy.